Here out of Los Angeles, a judge has ruled that Houston-raised singer David will stand trial for the killing of a 14-year-old girl. The judge decided that the evidence presented during a hearing last week that there was probable cause for charges of murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child, and unlawful mutilation of human remains. David, whose real name is David Burke, has pleaded not guilty.
A mother has to be fanned so she doesn't faint in a downtown Los Angeles courtroom. On the screen in front of her is a piece of evidence, a photograph of her daughter's hand. This happened this week, not years ago. By the fifth day of testimony, a judge looked at everything prosecutors had laid out and ruled there was enough to move forward. That decision came down yesterday. A rising pop star is now headed to trial, accused of ending a 14-year-old girl's life and going right on with his career while she stayed hidden for months, not far from some of the most photographed streets on Earth. To understand how it got to that courtroom, you have to go back to where this really started. An ordinary morning at a tow yard in Hollywood, and a smell that wouldn't have a name for 9 more days. If you're new here, go ahead and hit subscribe before we keep going. This case is still moving, and you won't want to miss where it leads next. And while you're at it, drop a comment with the city you're watching from tonight. I read through all of them. Let's rewind to where this actually starts, because none of it makes sense out of order. September 8th, 2025. A tow yard in Hollywood. The kind of place cars end up after they've sat too long on a hillside street somewhere. It was an ordinary morning until one car on the upper deck started drawing flies, and kept drawing them, for days. A black Tesla. The smell coming off it had gotten strong enough that workers were backing away before their brains had caught up to why. The yard manager had had enough after a few days of it. So he made the call, describing a strong odor of decomposition coming from the vehicle, and flies swarming it from every direction. When LAPD robbery homicide detectives arrived, they knew almost immediately what they were walking into. A Tesla doesn't have an engine under the hood. It has storage space up front, what people who own one call a frunk, and that's exactly where the smell was strongest. Detectives got a warrant, opened the compartment, and found remains that had been sealed away for some time. What they found told them this wasn't simply a body that had been placed there. It had been taken apart first, deliberately, in a way that suggested whoever did it understood exactly what they were doing to the evidence in the process. They had a body. They didn't have a name yet. What they did have was a car, and a car comes with paperwork. This particular Tesla was registered to a 20-year-old musician, someone with millions of followers online, and a debut album about to drop. That part of the story can wait a minute though, because for months afterward, most of the coverage out there led with his name first. This one isn't going to. Before you hear who owned that car, you should know who was inside it. Her name was Celeste Abigail Rivas Hernandez. She was 14 years old. Investigators confirmed her identity through dental records, 9 days after the Tesla was towed. And the timing is hard to sit with. Her remains were found 1 day before what would have been her 15th birthday. She was from Lake Elsinore, an inland empire town roughly 80 miles from the Hollywood hillside where she was found. The kind of place people move to for quieter streets and a slower pace than the city. She walked to a corner store near her house most days for candy, a soda, sometimes a bag of Takis, and the man behind the counter knew her by her hair before he ever needed her name. Long, dark, and curly, impossible to mistake for anyone else. She had a sister, Jennifer. She loved Hello Kitty. She loved to sing and dance. Neighbors and family describe her almost the same way, unprompted. A strong, funny, beautiful girl who was simply present in people's lives. Here's the part I won't soften, because Celeste deserves the whole truth, not an easier version of it. This wasn't the first time she'd gone missing. In the year before her body was found, her family reported her missing 3 separate times, starting on Valentine's Day of 2024. Each time she came home within days or weeks, and each time her family exhaled and tried to settle back into normal life. Then, in the spring of 2024, she left one more time. This time, she didn't come back. Her family says there was one final phone call home, and then silence. Her mother posted pleas on social media. Her family scoured their own neighborhood surveillance footage, frame by frame, looking for her face. And some residents in Lake Elsinore later said they'd spotted Celeste around town, even after she'd been reported missing. She wasn't gone the way everyone assumed. She was somewhere, living a life her own family couldn't see the shape of. Her mother had one piece of that puzzle, and she'd been carrying it quietly for a while. Celeste had mentioned a boyfriend. Older. Just a first name, nothing more. Her mother had never met him, never seen his face, never once heard him ask to come to the door. Just a name, attached to a girl who kept leaving home, and kept almost, but not quite, making it all the way back. That name is where the next part of this story picks up. And once you know the rest of it, you'll understand exactly why he never once let himself be seen. The name from the last chapter has a full one now. David Anthony Burke. Born in Queens, New York in 2005. Raised for a stretch in the Houston area, where his family still lives. You know him by his stage name, D4vd. And by 2025, that name was worth more than most people make in a lifetime. It started with a video game. As a teenager, Burke ran a small gaming channel under the handle Ant, posting Fortnite highlight reels like thousands of other bored kids with a camera. The problem was copyright. Every montage he uploaded kept getting flagged and pulled for the music playing underneath it. His mother had a simple suggestion: make your own. He recorded his first song within the hour, using earbuds and free software, sitting in his sister's closet because it was the quietest room in the house. That song became Runaway. A year later, in July of 2022, he released Romantic Homicide. It went viral on TikTok, cracked the Billboard Hot 100, and by September, 2 major labels had signed him. 2 EPs followed in 2023. He opened for SZA. He won BMI Pop Awards. In April of 2025, his debut album, Withered, arrived. 2 days before it dropped, prosecutors say, Celeste Rivas Hernandez was already dead. Roughly 4 months after that, in early September, Fortnite released his song Locked and Loaded as the game's first ever official anthem. The game that started his whole career come full circle. Days later, her body was found. There's a detail from earlier in his catalog that people didn't think twice about at the time, and now can't stop thinking about. The music video for Romantic Homicide introduced an alter ego, a masked antagonist Burke created for the visuals. He said the character wore a blindfold for one reason, so he'd never have to answer for the damage he caused. Months before his debut album, he released another video for a song called One More Dance that showed him dragging a body across the ground and loading it into the trunk of a car. At the time, it was just aesthetic, the kind of dark imagery that's all over pop music. Nobody watching it knew what to look for yet. Now, back to Celeste, and how the two of them actually found each other. According to a court filing, they connected online in 2022 through Discord, playing video games together. She was as young as 11 years old. He was already a legal adult. Prosecutors say the relationship escalated over the following 2 years and became sexual by the time Celeste was 13 and Burke was 18. Burke has pleaded not guilty to all of it, and under the law, he remains innocent unless and until a jury says otherwise. But it's worth hearing, in his own words, how he explained things to the one authority that ever asked him directly. That moment came on February 17th, 2024. Riverside County investigators, searching for Celeste after her first disappearance, traced a phone number in her records back to Burke and called him. He said he hadn't spoken to her in days. That same night, Los Angeles County deputies went further and showed up at his rental home in West Hollywood. Body camera footage played in court this year shows what happened next. Burke told them he'd only ever met Celeste in person once. When they told him she was 13, he said she'd told him she was 18, and to prove he believed it, he pulled up her yearbook photo, saved on his own phone. Deputies searched the house, didn't find her, and left satisfied. One of them told him on the way out, "I hope they find her." Celeste came home to Lake Elsinore 2 days later. Here's what makes that scene almost unbearable in hindsight. Celeste wasn't only lying to her family. She carried fake identification and told people in Burke's orbit that she was a 19-year-old USC student. She was photographed at industry parties that summer, standing near him in rooms full of adults who had no reason to look twice. People who knew him at the time have since said they simply assumed he had an older girlfriend. The lie worked because everyone around them had a reason to believe it. And there was a detail that didn't fit the lie at all, hiding in plain sight the whole time. Investigators found a tattoo on Celeste's right index finger, a single word, shh, in red ink. Photos from months before her death show the identical word on the identical finger on Burke's hand. It wasn't the only one. when he was booked into jail this April, more than a year after Celeste first went missing, officers documented a second tattoo on his ring finger. Her name, Celeste, still there. What happened to that relationship over the following year is what turns a disturbing secret into a homicide. That's where we're headed next. The year that followed was when things both deepened and started to come apart. Text records that would later surface in court trace Burke and Celeste's communication back to August of 2022, when she was 11, and show it continuing almost without interruption until the night she died. Somewhere inside those years, according to prosecutors, Celeste became pregnant and had an abortion at 13 years old. It's a single fact, stated plainly, but it says more about the real nature of what was happening to her than almost anything else in this case. The relationship, if that's even the right word for it, officially broke off in November of 2024. Broke off is doing a lot of work in that sentence, though, because the two of them kept talking, and prosecutors say the physical relationship didn't fully stop either. It just got messier, more on again, off again, more volatile. Not everything from those years stayed hidden either. At this year's hearing, Burke's defense introduced a notarized document, which they say Celeste's parents signed, granting permission for her to travel to London with him in 2024. It's a detail that complicates the total secrecy version of this story, and one that will likely be argued over for the length of the trial. By April of 2025, Burke had a lot riding on the next few weeks. His debut album was about to release. His financial manager would later testify he'd earned somewhere around $10 million in the 2 years leading up to that moment. And Celeste, prosecutors argue, was the one person who could take all of it away. On April 22nd, the two of them had it out over text, and it wasn't the first time. Celeste was furious about another woman in Burke's life, someone who'd reportedly been at his house, and in the heat of it, she threatened him. She said she'd hurt him. She said she'd end his career and his life. Prosecutors point to this exchange as the moment everything changed for Burke. Proof, they argue, that he now knew exactly what he stood to lose, and exactly who was threatening to take it. His defense reads the same messages differently, arguing they show a far more volatile, two-directional relationship than prosecutors have described, and that it was Celeste who reached out the next day, not the other way around. Both sides agree on what was typed. They don't agree on what it means. What isn't in dispute is what happened next. The following evening, April 23rd, Burke sent an Uber to Lake Elsinore to bring Celeste to his home in the Hollywood Hills. As the car neared his street sometime after 10 that night, Celeste sent one last text. "Girly pop, I'm almost there. Open your door if you're home." He told her the gate was open. She had just turned onto his street. She never made it back out. Prosecutors say that within minutes of walking through that door, Burke attacked her with a sharp weapon, and that she died there that night, before 10:30. Then, according to cellular records presented in court, Burke did something that takes a particular kind of coldness to plan out. He kept texting her, asking where she was, then just saying hello, then just typing her name, over and over. At one point, he asked if she'd blocked him. Then he said he'd try calling her sister to see if she'd heard anything. Every message went to a phone that would never be read again, building, investigators believe, a digital trail meant to make him look like a worried boyfriend, instead of what prosecutors say he actually was. Sometime after midnight, cell tower data placed him driving north, towards Santa Barbara County, along a stretch of Highway 154. Celeste's passport would later turn up on the shoulder of that same road. The next day, using a name that wasn't his own, Burke went shopping online. Fireproof mats, a chainsaw, an inflatable pool, cleaning supplies. Investigators would eventually connect nearly every item on that list to what they found, months later, in his garage. He had a body in his house, evidence he was actively destroying, and in a matter of days, a debut album to promote to the entire world. Somehow, prosecutors say, he managed to do all three at once. How he pulled that off, and how long it actually took investigators to catch up to him, is where we go next. 4 months. That's how long Burke had between that night and the moment a tow yard manager in Hollywood picked up the phone. And for those 4 months, by every outward appearance, he simply kept living his life. He finished out tour dates. His album climbed the charts. In early September, right on schedule, Fortnite released Locked and Loaded, the full circle moment he'd talked about in interviews. timed perfectly with a career that, from the outside, looked like it was only getting bigger. What he didn't see coming. Within the investigation's earliest days, Interscope quietly dropped him from a record deal, reportedly worth up to $19 million. The very fortune prosecutors say he killed to protect. Behind the scenes, the cleanup never really stopped either. On July 7th, using another fake name, Burke ordered what's called a burn cage, a small metal incinerator built to destroy things completely. Later that same month, security footage shows him parking the Tesla on a quiet street near his home and simply walking away from it. He never came back for it. Weeks passed. It was ticketed, then eventually towed to that Hollywood yard you already know about. What you don't know yet is what happened on the investigation side of that discovery. 9 days after the tow, on September 17th, LAPD detectives returned to Burke's Hollywood Hills home, this time with a search warrant. They left with a computer and boxes of evidence. In the garage, they found what they were looking for: blood that DNA testing would later match to Celeste. 2 days after that, Burke canceled the rest of his tour, including a hometown show in Los Angeles and a planned appearance at the Grammy Museum. He never publicly explained why. By then, he didn't have to. Everyone with a search bar already knew. Interest in this case got so intense, so fast, that police actually had to step in and correct the record. Rumors spread online that Celeste's body had been found frozen or decapitated. Neither was true, and the LAPD said so directly, adding that the decision to seal her autopsy had nothing to do with hiding information from the public. It was to make sure their own detectives learned the facts before the internet did. For months after that, almost nothing about the case became public at all. A Los Angeles County grand jury began hearing evidence that November, and grand jury proceedings are secret by design, which meant the public got almost nothing while the machinery underneath it kept turning. In January, a streamer and friend of Burke's named Neo Langston was arrested on an out-of-state warrant after failing to show up as a witness. Burke's own parents and younger brother fought a summons ordering them to testify, arguing in a Texas court that they'd never been given a fair chance to challenge it. However hard the people closest to him tried to stay out of it, this case kept pulling more of them in. And yet, through all of it, only one person has ever actually been arrested for what happened to Celeste. That arrest came in April of this year. Days later, Burke walked into a downtown Los Angeles courtroom in an orange jumpsuit to be arraigned. He pleaded not guilty to every charge: first-degree murder with special circumstances, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, and unlawful mutilation of human remains. His attorneys said the evidence would ultimately clear him. Celeste's parents, through their attorney, thanked the investigators who'd worked the case for over a year, then largely went quiet, saying only that there were no words for what they were living through. The district attorney laid out exactly what Burke was facing if convicted: life in prison without the possibility of parole, or the death penalty, though California currently has a moratorium on carrying out executions. Whether prosecutors will actually seek it is a decision that hasn't been made yet. Which brings us to now, to the same courtroom this story opened in. Over 5 days last week, prosecutors called more than 10 witnesses and walked a judge through the evidence you've just heard, and plenty this video hasn't had room for. On Monday, that judge ruled there was enough to send David Anthony Burke to trial. Afterward, the district attorney stood in front of the cameras and said that everything jurors hadn't yet heard was, in his words, only a small piece of what investigators have gathered. He called it a parent's worst nightmare. Burke's next court date is the end of August, with a trial likely to follow within a couple of months after that. And under the law, until 12 jurors say otherwise, he remains, officially, an innocent man. If there's one thing worth carrying out of this story, it's this: a relationship an adult goes out of his way to hide from everyone who loves a child is never hidden by accident. Celeste Rivas Hernandez never got the chance to become an adult herself. She was 14. She had a sister who still runs ordinary errands on ordinary weekends, because life doesn't stop, even now. She had a whole neighborhood that keeps a memorial glowing outside her family's home, fresh flowers laid over the ones that already wilted, because somebody there decided her name wasn't going to go dark. Her parents still walk into that courtroom together, holding hands, to sit through the worst details a family can hear about their own child, because they refuse to let her be remembered as a detail in a pop star's story. So we won't either. Her name was Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Whatever happens next in that courtroom, that's the name worth carrying out of this video. If this is a case you'll want to keep following, subscribing is the easiest way to catch it the moment there's an update, and this one is far from over. Tell us in the comments what stood out to you most tonight. Thanks for staying for all of it, and not just the headline.